Today on our 2015 Chevrolet Silverado 2500, we're going to be taking a look at and showing you how to install CURT's EZr double lock underbed gooseneck trailer hitch with the installation kit. This is what our gooseneck is going to look like installed. As you can see, it mounts underneath our truck bed. That way we still have full bed access up top. Now, one of the main features about this gooseneck is that it has a double locking pin. So it's actually going to hold your ball with 2 pins instead of 1, unlike many of the others. The reason this is an upgrade is because it provides double the strength. Up top, this is what it's going to look like. Here we have our ball, and here's that double locking pinholes. You can also see there's some grooves here, which that's only going to let you to install your ball one way. As you can see, with it correctly installed, it sits nice and flat. If you were to try to put it in any other way, it wouldn't work. Another cool thing is when you're not using it, you can take it and actually flip it upside down. As you can see, it has a little handle welded on. Put it in like that, and then CURT also gives you a nice rubber cap. That way you keep your ball protected and covered. Now the ball size is going to be 2 5/16. This gooseneck does have a 6,000 pound vertical load limit and a 30,000 pound maximum gross trailer limit. However, it's always a good idea to check in your Silverado's owner's manual to make sure your truck can pull that much weight. The safety chain loops are going to be 5/8. And they're going to have a nice spring action to keep them pulled down to the bed when not in use. But also they're going to be large enough and easy enough to pull up when you do need them. As you can see, there's quite a bit of an opening here, so you'll be able to use just about any size hook that you might have. Now down here along the frame we have our handle. This is really easy to do. Whenever you need to unlock it, you just pull it towards you and turn it to your left a little bit, and that'll hold it into place while you're putting your ball in or taking it out. When you're ready to lock it, you simply just turn it and it'll pull itself back into place. To begin our install, I went ahead and lowered and removed our spare tire. That way it'll give us some more room when we're working on our installation. We're going to remove our wheel well lining. We're going to do that by using a T15 Torx bit to remove these fasteners. Now there's going to be multiple ones, and they're going to be the exact same on the other side. With all the fasteners out, we can then kind of pull on our wheel well liner and work it out from underneath the truck. This can be kind of tricky, so just go from one side to the other. Now we'll go ahead and repeat that on the other side. Alright, next we're going to go ahead and lower the exhaust. Right here, right in front of the rear axle, there's going to be 2 hangers. What I did was I sprayed them down with some penetrating oil. That way it's going to be a little easier to get off. So you can use a pry bar to apply pressure on the isolator. And right behind the tailpipe, there's another one. We went ahead and used the same process to get that off. We're going to need to trim this heat shield up above the exhaust. We just need to trim out a section of it. That way all of our bracketry can fit underneath the bed. Now this is the area. I went ahead and marked it. We're going to need to trim from inside of this bed support channel to the next one right above this cross beam. So we're going to use a Dremel tool to remove this, but you can use a pair of tin snips or whatever else you might have. Alright, on each wheel well there's going to be a tab that looks like this. We're going to need to bend that up. That way we have enough room to get our crossbar to go across to the other side. Now what I like to do is just use a crescent wrench. Just put it over and just lightly pry up on it and kind of just work your way around. That way we can avoid damaging the tab. Now on the rear cross arm, there's going to be some threaded holes. It makes it a lot easier to take one of the included bolts and just run them down and through the holes to clear out the threads. If there's any debris in there, it's going to be a lot easier to take care of that with it outside instead of underneath the truck. Now you'll notice these holes are offset. They're closer to one edge of the crossbar. And how they're going to work is, this is going to sit on the truck's frame rails like this. You're going to want the holes to be as close as possible to the frame rail. So once we have the threads cleaned out, what we're going to do is take it and slide it over the truck's frame right in front of this channel here. Until it gets to the other side, just like that. Our rear cross arm will be an L shape. And as you can see, on the top side of it is completely flat. And on this side, there's going to be some holes here. Now we're going to want this arm to be positioned with this top side facing the bed of the truck. And this side, we're going to want the holes facing towards the rear of the truck. So we can go ahead and put this in the same way we did the rear cross arm. About where this tab is that we bent, be the right spot. So we're going to want to flip this cross arm in this position, that way the holes will face front and back and not up and down. We're going to want to also get it as close as we can to this channel underneath the bed. If you can't do it by hand, you can get an advantage by using a crescent wrench and flip it that way. As I mentioned earlier, you're going to want to make sure the holes in the bar are as close as they can to the frame rails of the truck. Before we put our center section up, I just want to kind of go over it a little bit. As you can see, this flat portion here, this will sit flat against the bottom of our bed. If we turn it around, you'll notice this hole is offset. Now the hole's offset towards the rear of the truck. So this is going to be closer to the rear, as well as this portion is going to face the back of the truck. And this side, with the square holes, that's going to face towards the front of the truck. Now it does come with some hardware and some keepers, which will really give us a hand when we're trying to get this in place and installed. So what we'll do is take our carriage bolt, and on the front portion of this intersection, slide it through one of the middle holes. We'll take this keeper, which just pushes on. You can thread it on. We'll do the same thing with this hole. And this will help keep these bolts in place. That way we have some started already when we put it up. CURT does provide us with the center locator. It's in the shape of a cross. And what this does is, before we put our center section into place, we're actually going to pop this into the hole, just like that. Now once we have our center section in place, you'll notice this small hole in the center. That's actually a pilot hole. So we'll use a drill and drill from the bottom up into the bed, and that'll give us our place to drill, and it'll match up perfectly with our center section. I'm going to go ahead and put our center section in place. These two bolts here were the two helper bolts that we put in the center section prior to lifting it up under the truck. So once we had it up here, I was able to slide this front cross arm over those two bolts, And then we just use some flange nuts to get them all hand tight. Now the remaining holes in the front are going to use the same setup. That carriage bolt and a flange nut. So get all those in and just get them hand tight. Now for the rear, in the center section, that's going to use a little bit different hardware. It's going to use a bolt like this and a conical tooth washer. Just make sure that the teeth on the conical tooth washer always face the hitch. And these go in from the inside and they'll thread into that rear cross arm. So once again, we'll get all these hand tight. On the front of the center section, over the gas tank here on the driver's side, the way we're going to fasten it will be a little bit different than the other three. Instead of putting our bolt through from the inside out, what we're going to do is take a carriage bolt and a block spacer and actually feed the bolt through this way. That way the threads will be sticking out of the hole, and we'll put our nut on like this. That way it's a little bit easier to tighten down. There's not a whole lot of room on this back side above the gas tank, so it's a lot easier to slide the bolt through and put the nut on this side as opposed to trying to tighten the nut over on the other side. Now we can focus on our frame plates that are going to get attached to the truck's frame itself. Now these are side specific, so what you're going to do is want this rounded portion to face towards the rear of the truck, and these tabs are going to face outward. Now how this is going to work is it's going to slide up in between our two cross arms, attach to the cross arms, and also attach to the frame. Now you can see these openings here. Those are going to be our attachment points. But we're going to actually have to fish wire a carriage bolt inside of the frame. And this bolt will stick out. We'll put our plate over it, and we'll be able to use some nuts to attach it that way. Now I'll show you how to do the fish wire technique now. So we'll take our threaded end of our fish wire. We're going to push that through one of the attachment point openings. Then we'll go on the inside of the frame rail. We're going to feed this through an opening, pull it out, and attach our hardware. All right, this big hole here, just behind our shock absorber, is where we're going to want our fish wire to come out from. So as I said, you'll feed it through the hole on the outside and push it, and you might have to stick your finger in there to get a hold of it to pull it out. Once it is out, you can take your spacer block, push it over the fish wire and into the hole. Then you can take your carriage bolt and thread that into the fish wire. We'll feed that into the hole as well. Now we can come on the outside of the frame, pull our fish wire, and our carriage bolt will come through. Pull it, kind of jiggle it a little bit, and help sometimes. Just like that. Now once it's through, just leave your fish wire on. That way if the bolt falls back through, it's not going to be a problem to get back out. Now we're going to repeat that process with this hole here. We're just going to take our fish wire and push it this way to that large opening on the inside and attach everything to the fish wire. So we can take the end of our fish wire and feed it through the holes on our side plate, like so. Then push our side plate into place. Now with it on there, we can remove one of our fish wires. Be careful not to let the bolt fall back into the frame. So you can just kind of use your finger to hold it. And just loosely install one of the nuts. Now the other side goes together exactly the same. So just go ahead and repeat that process. Now the hardware that we're going to use to attach our frame plate to The rear cross arm will be a 1/2-inch bolt and a conical tooth washer. Always make sure that the teeth on the washer face the metal portion of the hitch. So let's do this. And once again, just get it loosely installed. That way we have a little wiggle room for the rest of the hardware. Now what we're going to use for this hole is a carriage bolt, a spacer block, and a flange nut. So we'll put the block on the carriage bolt, and from the inside going out, feed it through. We'll take our flange nut, once again loosely install it. We're going to do the same thing to the other side. Now if you come back down underneath the truck, before we tighten everything down, we want to make sure that our center section is even and square. Now to do that, what I do is push this all the way against this channel here on the truck bed, and that'll square it up. Now as far as to make sure it's centered and even, what you can do is there's some ridges here on the underside of the bed. You can make sure that the edge of the center section lines up with the edge of the ridge, and the same thing on the other side. You can kind of run your fingers down and feel the edge, the center section, and that'll give you a good idea if you have it centered or not. If you don't, you can just make your minor adjustment, and it helps to use a rubber mallet or even a pry bar. We can snug all of our hardware down now, starting with our frame bolts. We're going to use a 15/16 socket to do that. We can also use a 15/16 to tighten up this carriage bolt here towards the front of the truck. And followed up by using a 3/4 inch socket to tighten up this rear one. Now underneath in the center section, we can go ahead and snug all this hardware down as well. Now with all the hardware snug down, we can focus on getting everything torqued. We're going to first torque down these frame bolts on the side plates on each side. You can find that specification in your instructions. Next, back underneath, we're going to torque down all of the center section hardware. Once again, you can find that torque spec in your instructions. We're going to go ahead and drill a pilot hole into the bed. That way we can make a hole large enough for our ball to go into the gooseneck. Now that orange cross we inserted into the center section earlier, that's what we're going to use as a guide to drill our pilot hole. As you can see right there in the middle, there's a small hole. We're going to run our pilot bit through that. And we're going to use a 3/16 drill bit to do that. Now we're going to make some holes for our safety chain loops right here and here, as well as the other side. And we're going to use a 5/8 bit and drill just a little bit to make an indentation, and then put our smaller pilot bit in it and drill through the center of it all the way through the bed. Then we'll go into the bed to finish the holes, because when you drill from the top, it makes for a cleaner cut. Here we have all of our pilot holes that we drilled from underneath. Now we're going to start with our large hole here in the center, and that'll allow us to drop our ball down into that center section. Now we just don't want to go drilling crazy into it, because we do need to pull that template out, so we will have to watch that. So we're going to use a 4-inch hole saw to get that hole drilled out. And the trick to using a hole saw with metal is high speed and low pressure. Now grab our vacuum cleaner to suck up any of these metal shavings that we made. I'm going to get a hand file and use it to clean up any burrs or sharp edges that we made from the hole. Now, it's never a good idea to leave any raw metal exposed on your truck. So we're just going to use some automotive clear coat spray paint to protect that. Alright, now instead of watching our paint dry, we're going to be proactive and use a 5/8 drill bit to drill out our safety chain loops. So we'll just find the center of our pilot hole. We're going to repeat that process to the other 3. Once again, we're going to use our vacuum to clean up our metal shavings. I went ahead and used some clear spray paint once again on the safety chain loop holes. And then as you can see, you can test fit it and make sure it fits properly. And now we can put our chrome ring into place. And that's going to be held in with 3 flathead screws with an Allen key head. Now back underneath, we can secure our safety chain loops. Now we're going to put a flat washer on it, a spring, another flat washer, and finally a nut. And now we can just tighten it until it is flush. Alright, we're going to repeat that same process on this side. We're going to take the cast lock pin, and with the side with the handle hole facing up, what we're going to do is slide it into the ball cylinder from the driver's side. Just like that. Now we can take our handle and placing it through the openings designed for it, put it into that lock pin. Now before we completely attach it, we are going to need to put a spring on the end of the handle. So what we're going to do is kind of just pull it back out a little bit. We'll take a flat washer, put that over it first. We'll run our spring over it. And we'll have a flat washer on the other end of the spring. This can be kind of tricky to get all lined up, so just take your time. And once it's fully seated, we can take our small bolt and nut, push it through. We'll tighten up our nut on the other side. Here's what it looks like once it's installed. All right, go ahead and rehang your exhaust. Now we went ahead and reinstalled our wheel liner. Now we have an issue. As you can see, our handle is hitting it. So what we're going to do is take a knife and cut out an opening. That way it'll work with no interference. And that'll do it for a look at an installation of CURT's EZr double lock underbed gooseneck trailer hitch with installation kit on our 2015 Chevrolet Silverado 2500.